welcome to SB&M is Here, the State Bar of New Mexico's official podcast. In this series, we'll discuss topics such as professional development, tools of the trade, and mental and professional well-being. Connecting the legal community across New Mexico, SB&M is here. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to SB&M is Here. I've been so excited to get these episodes off the ground for you guys and introduce our guest in each episode that I've forgotten to say who I am almost every single time. So if you're curious as to what voice is welcoming you to each episode, my name is Morgan Pettit. I'm the Member Services Coordinator at the State Bar of New Mexico, and I'm the main brainchild behind these podcasts, so for better or for worse. But if you ever have any feedback or questions, please reach out to me. Again, my name is Morgan Pettit. And as always, if you haven't listened to our first few episodes, they will be available on the listening platforms of Spotify, iTunes, or YouTube, as well as the State Bar website. Make sure to subscribe on your preferred platform to receive notifications when a new episode is ready. As we continue to settle into this podcast, I again want to thank everyone for their feedback and suggestions thus far. This was a large endeavor, but really only came to fruition because of you all, the membership. We hope to be able to record in person soon with some beautiful and shiny microphones, so bear with us a little bit longer on the audio. But in the meantime, please continue to respond to our survey found at nmbar.org/podcast. We've already received a dozen of new episodes, ideas including construction law, health law, and solo and small firm operations, just to name a few. This episode, we will be sharing tools of the trade. Today, we will continue with the Young Lawyers Division sub-series of What I Wish I Knew. Our presenters will be Allison Block-Chavez, the current YLD Chair, and Asia Brooks, the Director for the Center for Self-Help and Dispute Resolution at the 2nd Judicial District. Allison and Asia, thank you so much for your time, and feel free to introduce yourselves and take it away.
Thanks, Morgan. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Young Lawyers Division podcast series, What I Wish I Knew. I am Allison Block-Chavez, the New Mexico State Bar's YLD Chair. In this podcast series, we talk to experienced practitioners about what they wish they knew when they began their careers. Our guests talk about their experiences as young lawyers and give insight and advice on day-to-day relationships, money, balance, and growth. Our guest today is Asia Brooks. Welcome, Asia.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk more with you about your experiences. So I've known Asia for a while through the legal community and mutual friends. Asia and I also currently serve on the State Bar's Board of Bar Commissioners. And I'm very excited to have her today because she has worked primarily in public interest law as an attorney, which will give us a bit different perspective from our other guests that we've had. As background, Asia is originally from Hobbs, New Mexico. She went to college at Wake Forest University in North Carolina and received her law degree at UNM. Asia is currently the Director for the Center for Self-Help and Dispute Resolution at the 2nd Judicial District Court in Bernalillo County. Prior to that, she was the Pro Bono Coordinator for New Mexico Legal Aid. She also served as a public defender in Bernalillo County. Asia is currently serving as the President of the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association, which means she leads the organization in all of its mentorship, scholarship, and CLE programs and events. She is a member of Iota Xi Omega, chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I hope I got that right, Asia.
You did. That was perfect.
Okay, great. And Asia has also been recognized for the work that she does for our community. So I want to mention that she has received the UNM Law School Alumni Promise Award. She's been recognized as a Albuquerque Business First 40 Under 40 honoree, and she's also received the 2nd Judicial Court's Pro Bono Committee's Exceptional Service and Leadership Award. And in preparing for this podcast interview and doing some Googling, I came across Asia's BBC Facebook page, where she provides a lot of great information about what the BBC is up to, CLEs, and state bar events. So I'd encourage everyone to find Asia's page and like it. You can just search Asia Brooks for Board of Bar Commissioners on Facebook. Asia is such a great advocate for low-income New Mexicans and women and minorities in the profession. She's a mom to Emerson and wife to Johnny, and I'm excited to talk to her today. Welcome, Asia.
Thank you.
So
let's go.
Yeah, let's get started. So we'll start with where we usually start, which is talking about our relationships at work, so day-to-day relationships. So I think a good place to start is you've worked in government and with nonprofit agencies. Why did you decide to work in these sectors, and what were some lessons that you've learned from working in these areas?
So I think that deciding to work in the sectors really came before law school, when I was an undergrad at Wake Forest. I took a class called Race and the Law. It was taught by the first Black woman professor, teacher that I ever had, and her name was Beth Hopkins. And it was just a really interesting class that dealt with kind of the interrelatedness of race, the law, socioeconomic factors. And so that really got me interested in going to law school. And, once I was at law school, I was still interested in these topics. So I took classes like Access to Justice, that was taught with Dean Scarnecchia at the time, and Children and the Law, that was taught by Professor April Land. That was a really cool class where we got to go in and audit some of the juvenile detention facilities in New Mexico, and speak with the youth who were incarcerated there. I also took the community lawyering clinic, where we got to work with juveniles who were in the system, and that was just an amazing experience. And so I think that background and interest in just the justice or injustice within the legal system really got me thinking about the law and how it affects people's lives. And so I think going into, government work and nonprofit work was really just an extension of that interest, right? And so I think that it only made sense for me to go into a job where I could actually work to try and make those systems more equal in whatever way that I could. I learned a lot working I started out at the Public Defender's Office after law school. I graduated in 2008 and immediately started at the Public Defender's Office. And so, that was a job where you're making decisions on your feet. Things are changing second to second, right? And I really learned how to think on my feet, how to present a case, right, in front of judges. And that's sometimes terrifying for me anyway. But I learned how to do that. After I left the Public Defender's Office, I started working at New Mexico Legal Aid as the pro bono coordinator for its volunteer attorney program. And so that was actually recruiting attorneys to help people who, were indigent or didn't have enough money to hire an attorney. And so that was a completely new set of skills that I had to learn in convincing attorneys to help folks out. And so all of the information that I learned in law school and at the Public Defender's Office informed my ability to be able to convince attorneys to take those cases.
That's great. And I'm sure both at Legal Aid and now in your current position at Second Judicial, you're interacting on a face-to-face level and really having an impact on many pro bono clients.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and we'll talk about that a little bit later probably, but I think just the immediate reward of being able to help people, right, with some of those issues that I talked about before with the intersection of race and poverty and the law, and being able to try and make things as equal as you can in what you're doing in your profession.
So now, also in your current position, you changed from presenting a case in front of a judge to now, I imagine, working collaboratively or working on projects with judges. Can you talk a bit about the difference in those two approaches to appearing before a judge and now working with them?
Sure. So as I stated, I started off out of law school working at the public defender's office. And so in that job, I was appearing before judges, you know, in criminal trials and in hearings. And so that was an interesting thing for me, just because I am not a person who likes to have the spotlight. I'm not a person who likes to present in front of people at all. And so that was new for me. That was different for me. That kind of pushed my boundaries a little bit. But, you know, I think it's kind of easy when you're in a job like that to see the judges as someone who's making these like life-changing decisions for your clients, right? And so it's easy to be like, oh, I disagree with that judge, or oh, the judge should have done this in this case, or oh, you know, I wish that you know, things would have happened differently in this case. And so you don't really, I mean, a little bit, but you don't really get to see the human side of the judges when you're just appearing in front of them. When I started the job at New Mexico Legal Aid, I was working with the pro bono committees in New Mexico as well. And so each of those committees, there are 13 across the state, were headed by judges or hearing officers. So I was working collaboratively with them to create programming to have, you know, people who are representing themselves get assistance from attorneys. And so I had to work with the judges. There was no conflict. There was no argument. It was working in tandem with them to get these programs started. And you know, that's what I do also at the court. You know, we have our arbitration and settlement facilitation programs where we have, you know, attorneys help folks with their cases. And so working with the judges is a completely different, you see a completely different side to them. And you get to see that they are trying to do good in the community. And, you know, I have been blessed to be on a lot of different commissions and boards with judges, you know, the Access to Justice Commission, the, you know, Committee on Diversity in the Legal Profession, just being a part of the state bar, you know, and being involved in some of those organizations, really, you get to connect with the judges in a different way. And so I think, you know, you don't really get to see the judges day to day in their like natural settings, I guess. But it's interesting when you do, because you understand that they're human and they're really trying to do good as well, right?
I think it is a good idea. I always try to recommend to people to try to get involved in different committees or commissions just for that reason, so that you can meet judges and see them outside of the courtroom and realize, oh, they are normal people too. Because sometimes with their robe and sitting up there, you know, they have this aura and can be kind of intimidating. But like you said, they really are trying to do good, and that's working with them on different projects or commissions, whether it's through the state bar or the Supreme Court or whatever, or even just volunteering for a clinic. That's a good way to see judges outside of the courtroom. So kind of in that same vein, you probably work with a lot of staff or non-attorneys in your position. Can you tell me what kind of things you do to work with them?
Yeah, definitely. So currently I am the director of the Center for Self-Help and Dispute Resolution at the 2nd Judicial District Court. And so I have a team of paralegals, and they help self-represented litigants with many different things, including, you know, forms, court procedure, all sorts of things. And so I just really, really enjoy working on a team. I've always liked working on teams. And I think with each job I have, it's more of a team mentality than really like, you know, a top-down approach or something like that. I really have found that in working on teams, it's better to get input from everyone and then move from there than to start out with your own ideas of how things are going and just go with your own idea. And, you know, I really learned a lot about that when I was at the volunteer attorney program and working across the state trying to get attorneys to take pro bono cases, you know, because you would go in and you'd say to a community and you say, oh, I have this great idea. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to get people help. And they'd be like, oh, well, if you're saying that we're going to have a clinic where we're using computers, we actually don't have the internet here. This is like a dead zone. And so you're like, oh my goodness, why didn't I get this input on the front end, right? It would have saved a lot of time and effort in, you know, going to those communities, talking with people, getting that input on the front end, and then moving from there versus trying to impose my own ideas of what's going to work on other people. And so, you know, and that's just with dealing with the public, but also that extends to, you know, teams and to paralegals and receptionists and assistants, you know, and any sort of staff that you have. I think really getting input and moving forward is the best kind of approach that I've had, at least. And that's what I try and do as a director.
Probably, like you said, especially working statewide where you might not be familiar with that community, getting input before you implement a program, like you said, that does sound like a good idea.
Yeah, and, you know, with my paralegals, they're on the front lines too. You know, they're the ones talking to the public. They're the ones seeing the issues pop up. So if I don't have input from them, you know, I'm not going to be creating programs that are useful. So I think really it's just so important to get that input on the front end.
And talking about being on the front lines, can you I'm sure have interacted and worked with a lot of pro se clients. Can you talk a little bit about some experiences you've had?
Yeah, definitely. And so, you know, a lot of my experiences, whether at the Public Defenders, New Mexico Legal Aid, or as the director of the center, we deal with people who are indigent. We deal with people who are normally representing themselves, you know, that sort of sector of the public. And so I think that really one of the most basic things that I've learned is just to listen to people. People really just want to be listened to. They want to be heard. They want to feel heard. And if you start out, like I said, trying to dictate to people, that never goes over well. So if you could just sit and you can listen, that is like more than half of the journey right there, is just listening to the person and making sure that they feel heard, right? I think that goes so far with most people. And then if you can actually help them a little bit, oh my goodness, like that's world changing, right? But, you know, I think that some of the experiences that I've had, you know, there have been some pretty interesting times when I was like, I don't really know how I am going to help this person, right? We had a gentleman come in to the self-help center and he was blind. And, you know, the system is not made for people with disabilities. It is just really, really difficult to navigate the legal profession. And we have to do better as a profession with that. But, you know, and there were some just basic things that he needed to get done. Even taking the elevator up to the whatever floor, right, to get his paperwork or whatever, those were things that were challenges. And you know, I actually went with him to, you know, on these different steps of what he needed to do. And he had to go to the sheriff's office, which is down the street from the courthouse. And, you know, they have these huge steps in the front of the sheriff's office. And they're like, well, our elevator's broken. And so it was just interesting to see the world and what he had to deal with. And that was like 30 minutes of my life. And he's dealing with that all day, every day, right? things that are so easy and that I take for granted, this person had to deal with these things at all times, right? And so it was just interesting to see that little hint of what he had to deal with on a daily basis. And that makes you even more motivated to try and make things better because, you know, it was difficult. It was really difficult. And, you know, I didn't know this, but there's a van that you can get, and I think it's run by the city, and they help people who have transportation issues. And so we were trying to get all of this done for this gentleman before his bus came, his city bus, and he actually ended up missing that bus. And then you can't request it to come back and get you. And so it was just, you know, so then even like not having the ability to have transportation is a whole nother issue, you know, that we all take for granted and that, you know, that people have to deal with. So it's just really interesting to see some of the challenges that people have.
And all those challenges, like you said, those weren't even getting into the substantive legal issues. Those were just
exactly
challenges trying to access the system.
Yes, exactly.
Interested in participating in the SB&M is Here podcast? We'd love to have you. It's as easy as recording from your office. All you need is an internet connection and a phone. To learn more, visit our website at nmbar.org/podcast.
So moving on to money, you know, you started out at the public defender's office, then you worked for a nonprofit, and now you're working in the public sector at the court. All of these jobs traditionally pay less than private law firm jobs. What kind of considerations regarding compensation did you think about when you were deciding to work in public interest?
Well, you know, I think that I was a little naive. Like, the only jobs, I went straight through law school from undergrad, and the only other jobs that I had was basically like internships in college and working retail in high school. So when I started working, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm rich. Like, this is great, right? And so I was pretty happy. And it was just me at that point. So, you know, I only had to think about me. But I think that after time went by and I started talking to people, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. I'm probably not making as much as folks who are working at these private firms. And I think that as I started talking to more lawyers in different types of jobs, I started to understand that there was a trade-off a little bit, right? So I think that when you're working for public interest jobs and you're making less, there is a consideration of time, right? And I'm not saying that people in those jobs don't dedicate as much time to their jobs. I'm saying that I think that, you know, when you have billable hours and you have these things where you're like working all the time, right? Yes, you're getting paid a lot, but you're also giving your time. And so I think that you also have to strike a balance, and I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, but I think, you know, having that time and cherishing that time is also something that I considered, right, that I thought was very important. And that took learning for me to learn how to do that, because when I was at the public defender's office, I was still working like I was at a private firm, right? I was still putting in hours on the weekend and doing all of this, right? But you really do just have to find a way to try and have time for yourself. And I think really having those considerations when you're thinking about compensation, and always wanting to grow, right? Always wanting to grow. But I think that, you know, there are some benefits, I think, but, you know, one of the big things being the reward that you get in helping people, right? I mean, all lawyers help people, but I think the reward is so immediate when you're working at places like the Public Defender's Office and New Mexico Legal Aid. You can see, you know, those rewards, right, like every day, right, in front of you. And so I think that some of that immediate reward, and being able to see some of the changes that you can make really made taking those jobs worth it so much, worth it just so much. It was just amazing to see even the little things, even the little things.
And I think probably when you're thinking about these jobs, and probably with all jobs, you're also considering your student loan debt and either how much, making enough money to pay it back, or if you're going through the public interest, there's an option for possible student loan debt forgiveness. Now, you recently told me that you paid off your student loans. I'm super jealous. Congratulations. That's a huge financial accomplishment. So, so that means you paid your loans and didn't opt for forgiveness. Can you maybe talk a little bit about working in the public sector, managing student loan debt, and why you chose to forego the federal loan forgiveness?
Yeah, definitely. And just to start off, I am so grateful and privileged to have parents who helped me with my student loan debt. So that was not all me. I cannot take full credit for that. They definitely helped me out a lot with my student loan debt. So if you're paying student loan debt, keep going, you'll get there, I promise. Or even if you don't get there, once your life is over, you can say, I still owe my debt, and you're not going to get this money from me. But yeah, so I did have help, but when looking at some of the loan repayment assistance programs, I think when I had just started, I didn't know a ton about what was available, and so it took me a little bit of time to figure out what was available. But when I started at the PD's office, I remember with the loan repayment assistance program, I think it's called LRAP. It has like an acronym as well. But you had to make under a certain amount of money to qualify. I think I remember at the time it was like $45,000. So you had to make under $45,000 to qualify. And I think when I was looking at that program, I made just a little bit over that. So I didn't actually qualify for that program. And then there was another program that came about that was called the John R. Justice Program. I don't know if it's still around, but I applied when I learned about it back in 2012, and I think their budget got cut. Like they had $100,000, and then it ended up being $55,000. But I did apply for it, and I didn't get an award. I'm not bitter about that because I still paid off my loans. But, I think that they only had a certain amount of money to give. I think maybe my husband got one of the awards, which goes to my debt as well. So in the end, I guess I really did benefit. And then the last one that I really didn't know about or really fully understand, the 10-year public service loan forgiveness program. So that's where you make 120 qualifying payments to your loan, and it's over a 10-year span of time, I believe. But by the time I learned about it, I had already been in for like 3 or 4 years already. And then I was like, well, I don't even know if I'm going to be in for 10 years. Like, I have no clue. So I didn't apply for that. I probably should have, looking back, because, now I've been doing public interest law for a very long time. But that was a program that was a 10-year commitment, and I don't really know what's going on with it now. I know there's been some controversy about some of those programs, and like if you miss one payment or something, you're disqualified. But I just say, if you can, just make those payments. If you have to defer. Just make what you can, right? And like I always tried to make a payment that was more than what I actually owed, so I didn't get into the situation of, oh my gosh, now this month I don't have enough money. I always tried to pay just a little bit more so that so I could pay them off. But it's difficult. Student loans is just like, it's an insane thing. And I think when you're getting them, you're like, oh, la la la, like this is just whatever. And then when you have to repay them, you're like, oh my gosh, I have to repay this. Like they want a lot of money.
I had the same feeling.
Yes. And so you just chip away at it little by little. That's what you do. And if you have to pay over, 60 years, you pay over 60 years.
Let's talk about balance and start off with, I want to ask you about how you manage your time and completing tasks, because especially now being a mom, your time's even more valuable to you. So how do you manage your time at work, and what do you do to make sure you complete tasks?
So I'm a big believer in to-do lists. I think I like them so much because I like crossing things off once I'm done with them. And so I love to-do lists. I make to-do lists for everything. I make to-do lists for, like tasks around the house. I make to-do lists for work things. I make shopping lists, all these things. But those are really helpful to me because I feel accomplished when I get to cross them off. So it keeps me motivated to actually do them, because as long as it's there on the list and it's not crossed off and it's like glaring there on the paper, I'm like, no, I need to cross this off. Like, I need to just get it done so I can cross it off the list. And then once I cross it off the list, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was great. I'm so glad I did that, right? Yay, pat myself on the back. But I love to-do lists. I have also started getting better with calendaring, and I am not like a natural calendarer. So, people who are good at calendaring, like calendar when the thing is happening, right? Like, okay, let's set a meeting. A minute after you discuss the time that you're going to meet, you put it on the calendar, right? I used to be the sort of person who was like, all right, here's the meeting date. And then like 2 days later, I'd be like, when was the meeting again? Shoot, I forgot to put it on my calendar. So I have now, even since the pandemic has started, it's even more important for me to calendar things. And of course, with Emerson, with having a baby, because you get caught up in like changing diapers or feeding or whatever. And like, it's 2 minutes until you're supposed to be somewhere. So I have found that calendaring is super important. And, I also think that checking in, mostly with staff, is really helpful. And that has been even more helpful during the pandemic as well, right? I've found that checking in more frequently with less information has been more productive than waiting forever and then giving like a barrage of information, because like no one's going to be able to remember everything that I have compiled in my head over a month, right? So I do these little mini check-ins now where I'm giving little pieces of information. All right, this is the update on this. This is the update on this, versus, these long 2-hour sessions where I'm going over all of the new information. So to-do lists, calendaring, and then like having little mini meetings.
Okay. So again, with having a new baby, have you had to create any boundaries for your professional and private life?
Oh my gosh. This question's hilarious, because I am so like notoriously bad with boundaries. I am so bad with boundaries in all aspects of my life. And so I have learned over time that you cannot say yes to everything. It's actually bad to say yes to everything, because that usually compromises the quality of what you can produce, right? Because you only have so much time in a day. So, and a lot of this I've learned since having, a husband and having Emerson now, an 8-month-old. You have to be able to say no to things, or else you won't have time to spend with your family and friends, right? And so I think that what I have taught myself is, if there's something that I'm like really, really passionate about, something that I really love, I should say yes to those things. And if there are things that I'm just really, just doing it because the person has asked me, I have to learn how to say no to those things, right? Because there are a lot of things that I'm really passionate about. So there's already going to be a lot on that end, right? And so the other things, if I'm saying yes to those other things, that means I'm not going to have time for family time, right? And so, and when you look at those competing things, it's just like you just have to be able to say no sometimes. And so I'm working on it. It's a struggle. I try and finish my workday at 5 every day. And it's very difficult during the pandemic, but I try and say, all right, no more work at 5. I'm not going to be working through the night. I'm just going to stop. And the good thing is I have a baby that usually is going to be crying. And so I have to stop.
Yeah, it's probably, like you said, especially hard now when we're working a lot from home and just where work and home are melding. And so it is important to be like, okay, it's time to turn off the computer.
Yep, exactly.
So there's been a lot of talk about mindfulness and being present and being, saying statements of gratitude. Do you do anything to practice mindfulness? And if so, what's worked for you?
So I have, because I don't go to the gym anymore now that the pandemic has happened, and I was barely really going to the gym before that. But I have started walking, and in our neighborhood, I live in the North Valley, and so we are really, really close to all of the drains and the acequias. And so I take Emerson in the morning. He wakes up super early. And so, I usually have like an hour in the morning to get myself ready. And we try by like 6:15, we try to hit the street and go for a walk. And so, it's New Mexico, so it's gorgeous, and you can see like the balloons coming up and the sky, and it's just like, it's not hot yet. So that's the time that I am the most mindful, and I can just kind of take in my surroundings and just, think about the good things. And I try and make it a positive walk. I try not to think too much about, negative things or like what I have to do at work, or, I just try and really be in the mindset of appreciating the things around me. And I've started listening to this podcast called Girl Trek, and it's a revolution of walking for Black women. And so there are two folks on the podcast, two Black women, and they have started this Black History Boot Camp where they talk about a different moment in Black history during each podcast. And so that has been really uplifting and really interesting. And also it helps to keep me walking and being healthy. And so that is also kind of like a meditation, even though it's not really like staying centered in the moment. It's also learning about some things about my own culture that I didn't really know. And so that's a really, really great podcast if folks want to check it out.
What's the name again?
It's done by Girl Trek, right? That's the
Girl
organization.
Trek.
And
cool.
Then the podcast is Black History Boot Camp.
Very cool. Yeah, walking outside, especially near the bosque where you are, and just getting kind of that fresh air and getting some exercise. I find that that's a good way to get the day going. I sometimes try to do some yoga in my backyard too, just to move a little bit and wake up some.
I am not flexible, so I have tried the yoga, but it is not for me. I do it like twice a year, and that's enough for me. But yes, I can do the walking.
So besides the walking and not the yoga, what do you do to take care of yourself? What do you do for self-care?
So, I love self-care. Before the pandemic, I used to travel, which I always tried to take at least one nice family trip and one nice friend trip a year. And that was really great because I just love going new places. I love eating new foods. I love experiencing new cultures. And so that was really a really kind of amazing way of caring for myself, right? I learned that was the way that I could actually really, really care for myself and really appreciate myself. And then, of course, like spas. I love spas. I love massages. I blame my mom because she introduced my sister and I to massages like really early. She used to work at a college, and they had these massage therapists who had to practice, I guess, to get their license. And so they needed people to practice on. So we were exposed to the beauty of massages very early on in life. And so I love massages. I love them. But now that, the COVID has happened, and I don't have those outlets, I think, one big part of self-care is therapy. And I am going to therapy. I have a therapist, and I think it's so important for people to do that. I don't think it's a thing that people should be ashamed of or should think that, I only need this when there's problems or things are going badly in my life. I just think that it's something that's so beneficial, and it is really taking care of yourself, right? And so I think that that's so important, and people don't really talk about it enough. I think people think that, I'm only going to need to go to a therapist if I am, in a really bad place, but you should go to therapy at all times, because it really is very helpful. Another thing that I've been doing is cooking a lot. I really enjoy cooking, which also helps me to eat a lot, which I don't know if that's self-care, but I like doing it.
Yeah, if it makes you happy, it's self-care.
It does. It does make me happy. And we have my husband's like growing all of this amazing food in the garden. So usually it's pretty healthy. So that helps as well. So I guess it is kind of self-care.
That's right. I have heard that you guys have a pretty amazing garden.
Yeah.
What are you growing?
Tomatoes, I don't know if I should say this on the podcast, but if you need tomatoes or if you need eggplant, we have tons, so many tomatoes and lots of eggplant. I think he said he has some chili, so we were getting ready to roast some chili and jalapenos, and oh my goodness, there's so much.
That's so fun. So a support network like family, friends, colleagues is often one of the best ways to overcome stress, especially in our profession. Who is your support network, and how does the network support you?
So I am so very blessed to have a really great support system. Even though my extended family, my parents and my sister don't live here, I talk to them basically every day. We FaceTime. Most of the time they just want to see Emerson, but they would like to see me every now and again sometimes. So I FaceTime with them, and they're just super supportive and just really amazing. My husband's great. He's an attorney as well. And so just being able to have him around and talk with him when I need to and share things with him, is really helpful. Mostly having a 8-month-old, it's really nice to have another parent there, right? I'm so amazed by single parents because I just don't understand how they can do it. Like, I am so grateful to have my husband to be able to help with the baby. If I have a meeting or whatever, a podcast, he can watch the baby, while I'm doing what I need to do, and I can watch the baby while he's doing what he needs to do. But it has been, having a great support network is just key. And I have really great friends as well who, are just fabulous people. And I think, one of the things that the pandemic has has done that I think is a good thing is it's forced people to be more intentional about keeping in touch with their friends and family. So my extended family, my mom and dad and sister and my aunt and my uncle and I have a weekly FaceTime call on Sundays, every Sunday, and we talk. And, you know, I've had like Zoom happy hours with friends, you know, because we can't see each other in person. And so just being able to connect via Zoom or FaceTime or something like that has been really helpful. And yeah, I think that it is really important to have a good support network, and I am lucky to have that.
The Young Lawyers Division is seeking recommendations on exceptional New Mexico young lawyers to feature in our new YL Spotlight series. The YLD will highlight young lawyers who are doing innovative work and are making an impact in their community. They'll be highlighted via a short article in the SCD Digest or via a mini podcast episode. If you have a young lawyer to nominate for the YL Spotlight, please email us at yldchair@nmbar.org. Well, and our profession is difficult, and it makes things even more difficult when we don't see ourselves represented in it. So for you, what's it like to be a Black woman in a profession that's traditionally occupied by white men?
Oh, Allison, there are just so many layers to that question. I just
probably do a separate podcast.
Yeah, I could definitely do a separate podcast on that, but it's just very interesting, I think, also when you not only see the inequities like within the profession, but you see them in the people who are in the profession, right? So it's like you see some of the racial inequities and inequalities in the criminal justice system, right? But then you look at the legal profession and you see that it's traditionally, you know, white men who are lawyers, right? And so it's not just like those systems itself, it's also just the larger profession. And so I think that it's a push and a pull. It's difficult. It's difficult. And I think that, you know, a lot of times I'm just trying to do the best I can do, you know, every day. And I think sometimes there are situations where you are forced to remember, oh my goodness, you are a Black woman in this space. You are not traditionally thought of as the person who would normally assume this role, right? And so in those situations, it's very difficult, but I think that you also have to use those as like teaching moments, if you can, if you have the capacity to do that. But I do think it's very difficult, but it's definitely necessary, right? And I would encourage people, you know, right now there's a lot of conversation about this, but I would encourage people to really focus on diversity and really start to change that narrative, right? Like, why is it that this is how it still is after all of these years, right? Like, we need to start changing that. And it shouldn't be, oh, yeah, it's been, you know, this many years that we've had this profession and it's basically still the same, right? It needs to start to change. And so I just hope that in the future, you know, somebody can be asking a white man, what is it like to be a white man in a profession, you know, the legal profession that traditionally Black women are, you know, are in charge of or whatever. I don't know. I just think sometimes that narrative has to change. And the only way to do that is together, right? Everybody has to work towards changing that.
Our last category we like to talk about is growth. And as a lawyer, a lot of growth is promoting yourself and self-promotion. So, and oftentimes you have to do that yourself or create your own opportunities. What are some ways that you've had to promote yourself during your career?
So, I have had to, and I mentioned this on a CLE that I just was able to moderate not too long ago, but I have imposter syndrome like crazy. And so a lot of times I talk myself out of things, and there's always that little voice that's like, what qualifications do you have to do this? Are you smart enough to do this? Are you good enough to do this, right? And so I think a lot of what I have to do myself personally is learning that I am qualified and I can promote myself, right? Because sometimes I am the person for the job and sometimes I am the person who needs to head that organization or whatever, right? And so I think that really kind of just like making sure that I'm not letting that voice talk me out of the things that I should be doing and the things that I should be trying to achieve is really, really important. And so, and it's not bad to promote yourself, right? Like, it's not. And other people promote themselves all the time. So I think that, and maybe it's, I don't know if it's being, I don't know if it has to do with race or gender or whatever. But a lot of times I feel like I hesitate when there comes the time to promote myself, right? And no one should hesitate. If you have the qualifications, if you have worked, you should promote yourself. And that's something that I struggle with, but I think that I just have to make sure that I am not standing in the way of myself, right? And so some of the ways that I've had to do that is just with different career opportunities, right? Like many times when I switched careers, I was not looking for a new job. I was perfectly happy with what I was doing before, but I think they were just ways that I could grow in my profession and as a person. And so really thinking about what I want in the future, right, has been very helpful. And so thinking, all right, is this job going to help me be somewhere in, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years? Am I going to learn a new skill set? And really that has helped me to promote myself. And other people have also helped to promote me. So it's not like I've done it all on my own. And it's me out there saying, I'm the best, look at me, like, choose me, right? It's also other people who say, hey, I think you should try for this thing. Like, I think you'd really be good at it. And so that has been very helpful as well.
And kind of in that same vein, you talked a little bit earlier about in college starting to think about working in public interest or helping people. Was there any kind of plan or idea that you tried to follow in developing your career?
I didn't really have a structured plan. It wasn't like I'm going to have this thing by 5 years. I'm going to have achieved this by 10 years. I'm going to be in this position by 20 years. It was more of a sort of growth and fulfillment sort of ideology, I guess I would say. So I feel like I listen to my feelings a lot, right? And so if I'm feeling fulfilled and I'm feeling that I'm doing a good job and I'm doing what I need to do, that has been more of what I have thought of as my plan, versus having, like a very set specific plan. But I have really found that that's worked for me. And I know when I'm not happy, and I know when I need to change things up and do something different. But I think as long as you're fulfilled and as long as you are happy, that should be the main consideration, right? And I think people sometimes get stuck in these plans where they're like, oh, I should be here at 10 years. Why am I not here? Like, what have I done to, not achieve the things that I need to achieve? And I think it's really important to grow, but I also think people can get caught up in that. And then they say, well, I'm not going to try this new thing because I should be on this other path here that I've already set up like 20 years ago, right? So I think that sometimes having those very structured plans can backfire a little bit. So I think you just have to be flexible with yourself.
Yeah, I think sometimes too you have an idea of what a certain job could be, or working at a certain firm could be, and then the reality is that that's not what you wanted, or you thought it was something different. So I think having
then you can change, right? Like you can always change that. And I think some people think, oh, well, let me just keep going for like, the next 5 years, and you don't get to have those 5 years back, right? It's like, no, it's okay. You can change. You can do something different that might make you happier.
And I think figuring that out, talking to mentors is imperative, and having a mentor at every stage of your career is really important. Who were mentors that you've had, and how have they helped you?
So I keep saying I'm like blessed and lucky, but I really am, because so many people have helped me in my profession and just in my life, right? And so some of the folks that I mentioned before, like friends and family, my support network, but also like organizations, right? So I'm the president of the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association, and that organization was founded in 1982 by attorneys, here in New Mexico. And so it was Ray Hamilton, Tommy Jewell, and Hannah Best. And then Angela Jewell helped with the articles of incorporation for the organization. And so those individuals have helped countless people, right, including me, to we talked about promotion before, right? And I said that there are people who have promoted me, right, who have said, you need to try and do this thing because I think you're qualified. I think you're smart enough. I think you're great, right? And I already have a problem with thinking those things of myself. So when you have other people who are saying, hey, you are smart. Hey, you should try and do this. Hey, you'd be great for this thing. That's just very helpful. And so some of those people are just like, they have helped me in, building my own self-confidence, but also pushing me to strive for more, right? To become the president of the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association. And so I think that if you struggle with some of those things, like having a mentor is only going to help. And so I was lucky enough to have New Mexico Black Lawyers Association start mentoring me when I was in law school, because I was involved with the Black Law Students Association. And so, the attorneys at the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association had a very collaborative relationship with BALSA. And so, I had those relationships when I was in law school, which was so helpful. And, from jobs, getting jobs to leading organizations, those folks have always had my back. And so they have helped me in just so many different ways. I can't even tell you.
And I've got to say, the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association, they mentor all students and all lawyers, because I've participated in events and contributed to the scholarship fund, and working with you and other folks that are members, I've received mentorship from them as well.
Definitely.
Cool. So this is my last question, and then we can wrap it up. Was there ever a risk that you took in your career that paid off, or maybe didn't?
I don't know about in my career. I would kind of take it back to before I became a lawyer, right? And I think I mentioned the reasons that I decided to become a lawyer. And I think that was a risk. I think that deciding to enter a profession, like we talked about, that's traditionally occupied by white men, right? And knowing the interaction of race in the law, and I think that was a risk, and I think that it has paid off. I am just so appreciative that I am in a community of people who are so supportive and so giving, and there's all these jokes about lawyers and how we're just like the worst people ever, and in my experience I have found that to be untrue. And so I am just very happy that the decision that I made to become a lawyer has really benefited me and has really made me happy. I have taken kind of the more non-traditional legal path, but that also makes me happy. I think that I've had a lot of different experiences within the law, and all in all, I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed being a lawyer, and I intend to enjoy it for the rest of the time that I work. So I would say that was a risk, and I would say that it has definitely paid off.
That's awesome. That's a great way to end too. Well, Asia, thanks so much for joining us and talking to us today. Do you have any final words of wisdom?
Every day is a new day. You can make it what you want it to be, and you can always start again, and you can always change. That, if you're unhappy, you can always change. If you're happy, keep doing what you're doing.
This has been a really positive and fun interview, Asia. Thanks so much.
Well, you're pretty fun yourself, so I appreciate you reaching out to me, because this has not been stressful. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be on a podcast and it's going to be recorded and around forever for anyone to listen to, but this has really been fun.
Oh, good. Well, like I said, I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your experiences, and I'm sure all the young lawyers and non-young lawyers that listen will appreciate your time today. So thank you again. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This episode was produced by the State Bar of New Mexico's Member Services Department and Young Lawyers Division. All editing and sound mixing was done by Blue Sky eLearn. Intro music is by Kevin McLeod at Incomtech. The views of the presenters are that of their own and are not endorsed by